Have there been any protests, any riots, any kind of action taken against this particular government by citizens of Guatemala?
Yeah, there have been protests. Actually, the protests erupted in April, and they've been going on ever since. So in April, there were accusations leveled against the vice president that she was part of this tax fraud scandal. In May, she stepped down over those accusations, and there have been a series of protests every Saturday since April. They reached a point of 60,000 people in May. Then they started to diminish slightly, and they grew smaller. Now they're starting with this latest round of accusations. Now they're starting to build again. There was a major protest on Saturday that a few thousand people showed up to. There have been marches through the streets all week. They've been relatively small, these marches this week. There's supposed to be a bigger one tomorrow of several thousand people. So these protests have really been constant ever since April.
Now, the allegations brought against President Molina have to do with graft, if I'm not mistaken. Can you go into some detail as to what some of these specific allegations against his government and the representatives and the players therein are being accused of?
Sure. So under this investigation, what the Attorney General's office is accusing him of is basically running a tax fraud racket by which he was essentially at the head of a chain of command, he and his vice president, of allowing goods to come through customs and accepting bribes. Essentially, there was like a lower level officials would accept bribes from companies at the customs checkpoints, and then those bribes would make their way up this chain of command and eventually be deposited into the bank accounts of the president and the vice president. So the accusations in this case are bribery and customs tax fraud.
Is there a forecast, so to speak, in terms of what's to take place in the near future given the unstable state of affairs in Guatemala?
Sure. So what has to happen now is that Congress has to put together a 5-member committee to investigate the president. That's going to take place tomorrow morning. And this 5-member committee will look into the accusations that the Attorney General has put forth, and they will present those findings to Congress. And once they present those findings to Congress, Congress will have to vote whether or not they strip the president of his immunity. And if they strip the president of his immunity, then the case will go back to the courts, and essentially prosecutors can request a warrant for his arrest and arrest him and call him before the courts like they could